motivation is to make the correct answer unquestionable in your mind. Where people go off the rails with critical reasoning is that they don't confine their thinking purely to the question at hand. If you think about the real world, if you don't focus very specifically on the question that you're being asked and not some broader question, then it's very easy to go wrong. So today we're going to cover the question types. There are 4 principal types of questions, and then we'll cover the strategy for answering those questions. So we'll go through the 4 types of questions without really looking at strategy in the first pass, if you like, and then a second pass much more slowly through each type of question, looking at the strategies for identifying the type of question you've got and then answering it correctly. So let's have a look at a typical question. So here's a typical question. The first step in any when you're doing critical reasoning questions is to read the question stem. So here it says on number 7 that I'm looking at here, the researcher's conclusion depends on which of the following assumptions. So then when you're reading the argument, you can be reading it looking for the researcher's conclusion. You're not interested in the overall thrust of the argument. You're interested in the researcher's conclusion, and it's important to take that out of the question stem and to make sure that when you're reading the argument, you're reading it with a particular aim to understand the researcher's conclusion. You also know that you're going to be looking for an assumption underlying the argument, so that helps you read the question in the most intelligent possible way. Now, once you've read the question stem, you're going to be able to identify the strategy, identify the type of question that you're being asked, and that will lead you to the correct strategy that you want to follow. So, the strategies are quite different from one another. There are 2 question types in particular where, to give them their names, inference questions, quite often the trap answers would be right answers if it was an assumption question. And on the assumption questions, quite often the trap wrong answers would be right answers if it was an inference question. So you want to recognize what the tempting wrong answers are and be able to sort of apply that to your strategy. Just like sentence correction, the key to a good result is pattern recognition and the ability to say, okay, I can see just from looking at the question what type of question this is, and therefore I'm going to be able to sort through the answer choices much more intelligently than just, okay, I'll read them all and see what pops out at me. Okay, let's have a look. Right, so these are the 4 types of questions that we're dealing with: assumption questions, inference or draw a conclusion questions, paradox questions, and method of reasoning questions. And broadly speaking, you're going to have something like 10 assumption questions, something like 2 inference questions, something like 1 paradox question, something like 1 method of reasoning question. Now, the paradox questions are the hardest questions, I mean, being very, very general about it, and the method of reasoning questions are the easiest questions. So if you're doing very well on the test, you may well see more than 1 paradox question. If you're doing poorly on the test, you may well see more than 1 method of reasoning question because of the adaptive nature of the test. So that's the questions. And obviously, since the assumption questions are the most numerous, well, that means 2 things. One is we're going to break those down into a number of subtypes, but also it means that they're the most important that we sort of revise in detail. Okay, so let's start looking at the questions. Now remember that what we're doing here is all we're doing at the moment is identifying the question type. I want you to be able to look at the question and read the question stem, and purely from the question stem say to yourself, right, this is an, in this case, inference question. We're not going to talk about the strategies just yet. We're going to just focus on how do you identify the type of question. An inference question is giving you some premises for an argument, and then it's asking you what follows on from these premises. And you've got to say, well, how can you identify an inference question? In the question stem itself, you will see one of these words: infer. What can you best properly infer? what would be the best inference to draw, what would be the best conclusion to draw, which of the below is best supported, or which of the below best explains the above. So that's the inference question. We're going to look quickly at one sample. Don't worry too much at this stage about the about getting them right or wrong, because I haven't started feed you strategies here, but this is just to help you recognize the question. We're going to look at question 11, and I'll open a poll for you to give me your view on what the correct answer might be. Inferred, we simply mean that here are the facts, here are the premises that were given, and which of the answer choices must follow, and that's a key word that you're going to get very bored of hearing me talk about in reference to inference questions. You're looking for something that must follow. So if it must follow, that means it can't possibly be an opinion. It can't possibly be something which requires additional evidence to make it true. It can't possibly be something which is sort of going outside the original basis of the argument. Now, the correct answer here is B. It is possible for a university that believes in equal opportunity to put different financial demands on different students. How do we know that? Well, we know because this report talks about 15 universities that do exactly that. What do we need to know that it's possible for a university to do that? We need to know that there's at least one example. If we could see one example in the real world, we could say, yes, it's definitely possible. Now, let's have a look at some of the others. If we say D, well, D is certainly the most tempting wrong answer, because D says universities with high tuition fees tend to give out lots of financial aid. Well, our report says that these 15 universities with the highest annual tuition fees give out large financial aid awards, but there is an extra piece of information that we need to make D correct. We don't know whether these 15 universities are representative of all universities that have high tuition fees. We might guess that that was the case, but we can't be sure that that's the case. There might be, depending on what definition of high tuition fees we choose, there might be, 15,000 different universities with high tuition fees. And these 15 universities with the highest annual tuition might not be representative. Now, so D is, certainly a very tempting wrong answer, but it's the wrong answer because it requires a smidgen more information. Any answer that requires even a tiny amount more information is not going to be correct, whereas B doesn't require any more information. It would be fair to say in inference questions that one of the things which causes the correct answer to get overlooked sometimes is that often the correct answer looks a bit boring. Well, we've got 15 universities here. Of course, it's possible. I'm glad that nobody chose A, C, or E. A and C are particularly hopeless answers in the sense that they rely on opinion. Following a belief in equal opportunity is a good way. And C, a university that offers large financial aid awards must do so. Okay, well, those are both definitively wrong. And in E, it talks about universities with large endowments. Well, the question itself doesn't talk about endowments at all. It talks about having high tuition fees, and so it would really be a stretch to go for E. So that's an inference question.